pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Once every 4 years, we preview this World Cup. France 2019, Canada crossing the pond to try to get their best finish ever in a World Cup. United States trying to defend their win of 4 years ago in Canada. But first of all, how you doing, Duane?
I'm doing well. I just had one of my flights canceled in Europe, so I have to figure that out today, but we'll sort it out. In the grand scheme of things, what are you going to do? You pay for cheap airlines sometimes that cancel on you. You just have to book another one. So There you go. But that's my day. Should be fun. Quickly, Kevin, before we get into this too deep, and this is more just a personal thing I put out there every 4 years, well, every 4 years. When I'm referring to the World Cup over the next month, I'm referring to the Women's World Cup. When I refer to the World Cup, when a Men's World Cup is going on, I'm referring to the Men's World Cup. I don't put the pronoun in there because why would I? It's obviously just the World Cup. On that note, Kevin, how are you?
I'm good. I thought you were talking about the Cricket World Cup. What's going on right now, too? No?
Touche. I think in context, people will understand I'm talking about soccer here.
I know I'm doing pretty good. This Women's World Cup is going to be a very interesting one. One of the most competitive World Cup I believe we'll see in this game. And I do feel Canada, U.S. men's national team are going to be good stories, but so is the host France, England as well. Netherlands have a great team. They're the defending Euro champions. So there's a lot of good teams. Marta and the oldest woman player in the world plays for Brazil too. Her name is escaping me right now, but it's going to be a great World Cup. And before we start to dig deep in the groups and figure out what our brackets look like and who's going to be the group winners and the game starts tomorrow. But before that, when you think about the France 2019 World Cup and all the narrative going into this World Cup, what is the story that is exciting you before it gets started?
I think, well, there's a few. Obviously, I think the competitiveness you touched on already, sort of the parity of this World Cup. As I said on yesterday's show, I think this is the deepest World Cup period that I have ever seen in terms of teams that potentially could win. I can legitimately make an argument for, well, I'm looking at my bracket right now, all 8 teams that are in the semifinal or in my quarterfinals. I think I could make an argument for them. Some would be less or more tenuous than others, but certainly there's that. I'm looking forward to see whether the U.S. can be toppled. The U.S. They are always such a huge story at any World Cup involving the women because they're the hero and the villain in so many ways, and they are a black and white team. You either love them or you hate them. You really do. And when I say hate them, of course, I'm referring to sports hate, the healthy kind of I want them to lose so bad kind of thing that's out there. And but that said, for as many people that will say that about them, there are a lot that say, I'm so sick of them winning, and I'm so sick of them doing this, and I'm so sick of them doing that. So they are a divisive team, and they will be divisive in France and entertaining in that way. I'm really looking forward to seeing what England can do. Could football come home?
That's what I was singing yesterday. Because, it's football's coming home. It could be interesting. And, this is not to be topical. I was trying not to make any topical references. But, basketball might be coming home, too.
Dwayne? I'm a little tired today. You'll know why. The Raptors won. If you're listening to this later, I'm in Toronto. I am a lifelong Raptors fan. Well, lifelong of the franchise.
Lifelong for the Raptors, not you, because Raptors are 25 years old. You're a bit older. But no. Yeah. And sorry, I just had to put this out there that basketball might be coming home, but this is a football show. And the Lionesses of England are a team that can be dangerous in this tournament. And with Gary Neville as their manager, he might not be the most tactical manager in the women's game now, but he is a motivator, and we have seen England perform well under him. So there's that. There's obviously France for me. If they cannot choke, would be a big candidate to the trophy here. But of course, there's a Christine Sinclair story as well, Duane. Will she get Abby Wambach's record in France?
I think so. I think she's going to get it in the second group stage game. I have a feeling that if Canada runs the game, it'll be the Cameroon game. The African teams are not all that strong in context to the rest of the tournament, so they could potentially get a couple goals there. And that New Zealand game, which will be tight, I think. But I've always had a hunch that might be the day that she gets this thing done in Grenoble in the French Alps. So that will be a fitting end of her career. Well, see, everyone this will probably be her last World Cup.
Yeah,
I say probably because she loves to play, but I do think that they'll move on from her in a World Cup sense after this one. But
she's going to play in the Olympics.
She will retire. Yeah, she'll retire after the Olympics from international play. I'm almost positive of that. But can Canada win this thing? We'll get into that in a minute. I famously gave them a 1% chance and had people attack me for it at the last World Cup. I used math to prove my point there. Using Canada's ability to defeat it. I won't get into the formula, but it actually did work out to less than 1%. I rounded up. I would give them that same 1 to 2% chance of winning this World Cup heading in. And look, 90% of the countries in the world don't have a 1% chance.
Yeah, that's true.
So there you go. I'm saying that it is conceivable. You can make the argument. I think, well, I'll save a little bit more of the analysts till we get into the Canadian section of this, but certainly I do think that Christine Sinclair, if she can get the record in France and go out quarterfinals or better, I think that would be a worthwhile and fitting tribute to one of the top all-time. She's GOAT. She's one of the GOATs of the women's game for sure.
Yeah, there's Mia Hamm, there's Abby Wambach. And Christine Sinclair is this generation's Wambach. It is that clear for us. We're a bit biased. We're Canadian. We've been watching Sinclair for the last 15 years, tearing it up almost everywhere she has been. So it is for us a bit, not necessarily emotional, but we've seen the journey. We know what she's able to do. And now that she has a team surrounding her that are very talented, I think I will go out on a limb, Duane, and say this might be the most talented Canadian women's national team ever. When you look at the talent and the ceiling, especially of players like Jordan Huitema and as well Janine Becky, Jessie Fleming, you see a team that is talented, and that probably gives motivation to Christine Sinclair to continue and to go to Tokyo next year and to maybe get a third medal in the third straight Olympic Games. And I think that's the motivation why, if I was her, which I'm not, but I would continue past this World Cup because you have another year with this team that you can help and pass on the knowledge that you do have to your teammates.
Yeah. Interesting. Canada is the fourth youngest team by average age in this tournament.
Take Christine Sinclair out, I think they're second. If you take one or two players out.
Yeah, so this clearly is, you're right, this is the most talented Canadian team that has ever taken the field. Their talent is imbalanced, I think, and without if you take Christine Sinclair out there, you're going to go down to second, but you're also going to lose, what makes this team potentially be able to win, because they really struggle to score. They do, especially against the better teams. And, we might as well continue talking about Canada here. I think I said this a couple times already. This is a team that will not be blown out of any game. They will be competitive against anyone in the world for the entire 90 minutes. I cannot see them losing badly in this tournament. When they go out, and it's probably a win, 98, 99% of the time it would be a win. It will probably be a 1-0, maybe a 2-0 with a late goal to one of the better teams. And the nil is the part that I worry about when I'm talking about Canada and handicapping them legitimately. Had we, if we were able to take a time machine or go to Lords before they go to the tournament and make Christine Sinclair 26 again, I'm taking that 1% and I'm making it 10%.
Yeah. I agree. Well, Duane, they are in France. The Fontaine de Jouvence is there somewhere.
My lords,
So
get a candle.
get a
Go on.
candle. But find the Fontaine. It's somewhere in France. Fontaine de Jouvence, if you don't know, is the mythical fountain that gives the property of youth when you drink it. You drink out of that fountain and you're 40 years younger, or whatever years you want. So if you find that mythical fountain in France somewhere in your travels, make sure you let Christine Sinclair know the GPS address and how to get there. Google Map directions bring me to the Fontaine de Jouvence, fountain of youth.
Let me know. Let me know as well. I could take a few years off.
Sure. Yeah, sure. If I would do so, because I've aged maybe a year in the last couple of weeks. That's what happens when you're trying to plan a wedding. You age.
I'd like
really
hair again.
quickly.
Maybe you guys. I've always wanted to grow hair again, just so that I could stay away from everyone I know for about 2 months, and then just show up with flowing locks, flip them back, and blow them
Who's
off.
that?
And
Like,
and
who's
then I
that
cut it
guy?
off the next day because I'm used to it bald. But yeah.
You're like, oh wait, it's windy. I have to take care of this thing. No. Give me the razor. Clip it away. Well, no, just to continue on Canada for a second, we'll start to look at the groups as well in a second. But for me, looking at this team in Canada and having Stephanie LeBay as now the starting goalkeeper, and she had time since the last World Cup to play more. She went through adversity as well with the NPSL last year, telling her not to play with the man in the Calgary Foothills situation. So there's a lot of great adversity, and she's been through a lot. Stephanie LeBay on the field, and now she's getting ready for this summer's World Cup, and I think she's one of the best goalkeepers in the world now. And with her attitude, the way she's able to convey discipline with her back line, the conversation, communication is going well. I'm really looking forward to, because there's a few big name veterans that haven't made the team, like Erin McLeod, Diana Matheson. But when I do look at Stephanie LeBay, I do see the number one goalkeeper, and I do see one of the best in the world.
Certainly, and look, it's part of an overall. There's no doubt in my mind that Canada is top 5 in the world defensively, period, and the keeper's obviously part of that. So weird. I'm thinking ahead right now in my head to our Gold Cup preview. It's like yin and yang. We're going to be previewing the exact opposite when we're talking about the Canadian men's national team. Putting that aside for a second, you could make an argument that Canada is the best defensive team in the world in many ways, although it's probably the U.S. The U.S. is just the best team in the world in all facets. So you got to go there for a while. But yeah, and LeBay is a big part of that. And it's a surprise, too, although she was the number 3 keeper for a lot of those tournaments for the bronze medals. LeBlanc and McLeod were holding down the fort for a long time. I was always an advocate to get LeBay in there more. I felt, with all due respect to LeBlanc, I always felt that she was hanging on through the cult of her personality more than her skills in the field at the end of her career a little bit, and LeBay would have made more sense to get her in earlier. But she took that Erin McLeod injury, and, no one wants to get a job through injury, but it happens. Then you have to take advantage of the opportunity she provided, particularly at the keeper position. And she absolutely has, and is a key part of this team, because as much as we can lament the lack of offense, the other side of that coin is the strong back line, and the fact that if Canada goes deep in this tournament, it will be, on the shoulders of that back line, and LeBay is a massive part of it.
Yeah, she is, and it's going to be a great World Cup. And let's start to look at the group stage right now. We have all the groups in front of you on your screens if you are listening to us on our video show. If you're listening to the podcast, well, here are the groups. Group A, France, Norway, Korea Republic, and Nigeria. Of course, Duane, there's a trend when a World Cup is played in Europe. European teams are successful, and usually one European team wins it, but you see European teams that usually are not necessarily contenders or sometimes are dark horses and even underdogs. In Europe, when a World Cup's in Europe, European team, it's like they all grow about a few inches. They all have magic, talent, and everything's working. So, as much as France, I know they're going to get out and win the group, I wouldn't be surprised if Norway gets out too. Nigeria and the Korean Republic will have something to say about this. But this is not as a clear-cut group as I thought it was a few months ago when the draw was done. This could be France-Norway, but this could be Nigeria-France too.
Yeah, I don't really believe in the African teams in this, and this is where we get into an unfortunate conversation about resources and about how priorities are given in large parts of the world. The simple reality is that the African nations and the South American nations fall behind the women's game because of the priorities they're given in their local FAs. We are talking about FAs in many cases that maybe lack resources. Often graft is a big part of the political system that they have to exist in, and that trickles through into their FAs, and the graft just isn't there. If you don't know what graft means, I mean, like, you need to bribe people to get stuff done. You need to, we would call it corrupt here, but in parts of the world, that was just how things work, right? And these women don't get the resources they need, and you've seen, in my mind, I have seen, as the overall strength of the women's game has increased, the strength of the African teams and the South American teams has decreased because they are still nations that rely a lot upon raw talent. I have France and Norway 1-2 in this group. I have South Korea and Nigeria. South Korea I've seen actually live a few times. They're kind of just that's just where they'll finish in this group. And I actually have Nigeria at the bottom of the group, and this will be a trend throughout these predictions. I really can't see the African nations stepping up to do much of anything in this tournament.
And you mentioned South America when you were talking about the graph situation. You talking about teams also. One thing, on the men's side, the infrastructure of the Women's Football Association does not always correlate with the same amount of infrastructures invested in the women's game. So when you have a team like Argentina qualifying for this World Cup in Group D, it's great. But it should have been there like a long time ago, because those countries do have a certain amount of knowledge that they could have transposed into the women's game earlier on. And it took a long time for it. Like Italy is there, but it took a long time for Italy. Mexico's not there. They didn't qualify for it. So you don't see the same powers. And you're slowly starting to see the same powers rise up in Europe, in some parts of South America, Argentina, or Brazil. But still, it's not at the level that it should be regarding the knowledge and investment in the game on the men's side. But it's starting to evolve, and it's starting to not just be the earliest countries to be involved in the game, like Canada, like the United States, and like in other parts of this world. But now you do see the football countries rising up, and I think that's a narrative that's important to keep an eye on, and it's going to continue. There's sleeping giants in the world of the women's game that are waking up at this moment and can be very dangerous in 4 years' time. Like Spain is one of the favorite in this tournament. I saw in the U20 World Cup. It was amazing to see. You mentioned New Zealand earlier. We'll talk about them when we talk about Canada's group. The U20 of New Zealand was impressive too. So, no, there's a lot of great teams rising up in this game right now. Group B, again, a lot of European teams. Germany, Spain, China, South Africa. Now, we know Germany and Spain have good programs. They've played well. Spain won the U20 World Cup. Can China be a danger here? China is hosting the Olympics next year. They do have ambitions in the women's football tournament in the Olympic in Tokyo next year. So, the Rio, Tokyo, but China's not too far away.
Tokyo, China, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Asia, yeah.
But China, are they a dark horse in this group? Could China finish top 2 in this group?
I think this group is very much a mirror of Group A, just with different European teams, and I do see the same gap. China was not all that impressive in qualifying since the peak of their program, which of course they were, a penalty kick away from winning the World Cup in 1999. That would have changed the narrative a whole lot. Obviously, we know that ended with sports bras and Sports Illustrated covers, but nonetheless, China was a player in that tournament. Without them, you don't get those dramatic moments. Alas, they've gone downhill a lot since then. This is a return to the World Cup after a couple of absences. I do think that China will be a player again in the women's game. I don't think they're there yet. My pick in this group is Germany, Spain 1-2 with a big gap down to China, and then again the South Africans are really there to make up the numbers.
Yeah, that would make sense, but I can see China squeezing in between Spain and Germany or something, depending of their result. I think there's a possibility here. If you are a betting person, maybe put a little wager on China's coming out of the group.
Spain,
maybe in third, but who knows?
Yeah, there are best third place finishers in this group. Real quickly on Spain. Spain is going to be a buzz team.
Spain is going to be Spain. Duane,
yeah.
Spain is going to play tiki-taka. Honestly, they're beautiful to watch.
They're going to get there. Their under-17 team was absolutely brilliant to watch. Under-17 teams rarely, you don't just, it's not like plug and play, right? Like you rarely take those 17 players and move them up to the 20s and then into the senior. But you can see the style and you can see the evolution of a system that's eventually going to create a World Cup champion. I have no doubt about that with Spain. They're not there yet, though, and I think that that's kind of the message, is that we are, there's going to be a lot of hipster Spain fans coming out of this tour. Just like back in the past, there was a lot of hipster French fans.
Or just like in 2008, there was a lot of hipster Spain fans before they won like 3 major tournaments in a row. I think we're going to see the same thing starting.
Yeah, and Spain will be fun to watch, and certainly, but people were starting to talk that way in 2015, and they were absolutely abysmal in Canada. So, they don't have a lot of experience, despite, the sexy name of Spain in football.
Yeah.
Different program. But we are, again, like the structures, and particularly the club game. Barcelona's behind it now. Real Madrid finally started a team. Atletico Madrid gets massive crowds, and they have for long treated their women's program as an equal with the men's program in Atleti. So, those three, the big three of Spain, all behind the women's game now, can only help it. And the Spanish game is ultimately dictated, more than almost any country in the world, is really dictated by, in particular, the classic rivalry. And Atleti, and over the last decade, has stepped up to make a solid third team in that sort of power dynamic. And with all three now involved on the women's side of the game, it's only a matter of time, but I don't think the time is yet.
No, I agree. But it's still going to be fun because we're going to see this team get better. From the next 3 big tournaments in the women's game, you do have this World Cup, you have the Olympic Games next year, and then you have the World Cup 4 years' time from now, 3 years from next year. So those are the 3 equivalent of what Spain did in the men's game 2008, 2010, 2012, right? So you get like those 3 tournaments. And if Spain can use this one to gather experience, to mold one of their young superstars that was amazing to play. I think I'm number 13, but I've watched so much soccer over the last 2 months that it all blends in. So sorry about that. But that Spain U17 team that you mentioned that we were able to watch on our television a few weeks ago in the U17 World Cup does give me a lot of hope for Spain's national team on the women's side, and I do see a superstar coming out of this. I do see like the next St. Clair, the next Alex Morgan won't be from Canada or United States. She could be coming from Spain.
She could also be in Australia, so why don't we move to Group C, because I want to talk about that.
Sam Kerr. Yeah, you're right. One of the best players, if not the best players in the world right now. Sam Kerr with Australia. Group C, Australia, Brazil, Italy, Jamaica. So this one could be easy to handicap. Brazil, Australia moves on.
This is the group of life in my mind.
Who's going to be the third place, though? Italy or Jamaica? That's actually interesting. I can see Jamaica give Italy a run for their money for the third place.
Jamaica is, for the record, the youngest team in the tournament statistically. They're largely based on... There's about half of the Jamaicans come from the NCAA system. So this is a very young, American-trained, American sort of developed team with high athleticism. They were incredibly lucky to get their spot. And they took their chance. So God bless them, right? But they're the weakest team in the tournament in my mind. But Italy is not exactly inspiring. It's interesting. it's unfortunate that we still have to talk in these ways, but you look at the macho cultures, and Spain is part of that sort of thing too, and they tend to struggle in the women's game because they have outdated views of how women can do. This is changing, but the Italian system is still woefully bad when it comes to this, and it's really just through pure numbers that they're able to find their way to a World Cup. I believe this is their second time they've been in a World Cup, but they've never been a factor in the women's game in any true way. And I put them third in this group. Australia top in the group. Brazil, who I think is beginning to slip. You mentioned their older players. Their artists still hanging around. Like these guys, this is like play the hits kind of stuff with Brazil. And there's no infrastructure around the team, not a lot of support from the federation. So that's where I have this, and Jamaica is a clear there for the experience as the youngest team in the tournament.
No, I agree, but it's going to be still an interesting aspect because Australia, Brazil, for me, who's going to win the group will say a lot because those two teams both have ambition. And Australia has one of the best players in the world in their ranks with Sam Kerr, and Brazil has one of the most talented offensive player in Marta, and there's a couple of players with her that can be dangerous. So for me, it could be the case of, well, you never know what can happen, but we know it's going to be either Australia or Brazil winning this group. So there's that, but it will be a couple of good games in Group C. Group D. Now, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a group of death either. But you do have England, the Lionesses. You do have Japan, the Blue Samurai, Scotland, and Argentina. Japan, one of the best teams in the world a couple of cycles ago. Are they still one of the best in the world now? Scotland, the rise of European women's football, part of this equation. In Argentina, can they translate their talent to the World Cup in this format? Those are all good questions, but England, Japan?
Actually, I have Scotland as an upset second-place finisher in this group. The Scottish women have shown a lot of resolve. They are, Japan is the clear number 2 pick by 90% of the world. There's no doubt about that. They are on a bit of a down cycle overall. The Japanese, from having gone to back-to-back finals, winning one, I think they are in a bit of a rebuild now, probably geared more towards preparing for a home Olympics next year. But so look, when I'm saying this, I'm hearing myself, and I understand that you can't pick chalk. It's boring, is what it comes down to. And I could see Scotland. I've been impressed with Scotland, the way that they played the U.S. very strong, the way that they've played other top nations strongly. I'm also impressed overall with the English system right now, and they finally got their head out of their ass, basically, the English, about 6 or 7 years ago, and said, maybe we should invest in the women's game. And the top clubs in England have started to get involved. It used to be like, if you looked at the top women's teams in England, club-wise, they were sort of attached to League One teams.
Or Championship, League One teams. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and now you look at their top, and it's Arsenal, Chelsea, City, and United finally, to their utter shame, did not have a women's program until last year. But at least when they put one in, they went all in, and they destroyed the lower level. They will be in the top tier next year, and you can argue one way or the other whether it would have been nice to have other teams other than your traditional Premier League powers dominating the Super League, but
it lasted a bit, right? Nottingham had a good one. Notts County, I think, had a good one in the women's side, and they were higher than the men's side forever. But no, you're right. And there's a few clubs in England that were doing good on the women's side for a long time before the money was there. Now that the money is there, unfortunately finds themselves being relegated. Feels like they've seen that movie before on the men's side. They're like, yeah, I don't like the ending of that movie. It doesn't matter which side it is, but no, it is interesting. But yeah, you might be right. Scotland could pull enough an upsets, and I could see England and Scotland being the top 2 teams out of this group, and then having Japan or Argentina fighting for the third best spot. Now, Group E, Group of Canada, maybe the group of death. Could be 3 teams in this group that are not that far from each other when we handicap this tournament. Canada, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Cameroon. Canada, of course, bronze winner in the last Olympics. Netherlands, defending European champion, and New Zealand rising to the level of one of the best teams in Oceania. So, Cameroon fourth. We agree with that?
Yeah. You mentioned that term group of death, and everyone's going to want to peg one, and this is the closest there is to one, I think, but I wouldn't classify it as a group of. There's going to be a lot of orange in this stadium. We'll just say that. It's a tough one there, but that it's the defensive strength of Canada in a group stage game that if they can find 3 goals, I think they win this group, and I think they can beat the Dutch in that third game to win the group. And the unfortunate irony of that is if you look at what we'll talk about in the second half of this show, they're better off losing the group because it's a better draw. But as long as you finish second, you don't want to finish third because that could draw you the U.S. in the round of 16. So, yes, I have Canada and the Netherlands as the top 2 teams here, with New Zealand as a strong third, Cameroon far behind.
That does make sense, and we'll see if it actually happens in Group E. Group F, the last group in our preview show. United States defending World Cup champions, Sweden, Thailand, and Chile. United States and Sweden clearly above the rest of this group. The question is, can Chile get best third and maybe get out of the group with the best third? And to be one team of South America coming out of the groups, we'll see if it can be Chile. But U.S. and Sweden, for me, are a lock here.
Yeah, I mean, Thailand, along with Jamaica, are arguably the worst teams in this tournament. And, this is an unfortunate draw it's a fortunate and unfortunate draw for a country like Thailand. They get to play 2 top 10 teams, which is something they'd never get a chance to do. And they get to play, the best team of all time, historically speaking, in the U.S. So it's a tough draw in terms of the results. It's a good draw in terms of experience. In terms of the third place teams, the way I always handicap that is to look sort of at what the weakest and what the strongest teams are in the group and sort of judge what the goal diff might look at the end. And that's where I think Chile might be in trouble because they have to play Sweden and the U.S. And if they lose both of those games heavy, it's going to be tough for them to grab one of the 4 third place finishes. That said, there's 4 of 6 third place teams go through. So it's a pretty forgiving format at 24. So I do have the U.S. winning the group with Sweden second, and it's also a group of life. There's a couple group of life in this one, and that's another one too.
Yeah, and we'll see if there's going to be some surprises and upset. But now we've went through the group stages and the groups and who we see coming out of the group. Duane, take us through your knockout stage. What do you have? If things go according to our predictions here, what do we have in the group stage? In the knockout stage, right, after the group stage?
All right, I'll just quickly go through it. Round of 16, then quarters, then semis, then final. So the way that my bracket shook out is that I had Norway playing Brazil in a round of 16 game, and I actually had Norway advancing. I just think the Brazilians are starting to fall behind. The raw talent teams that don't have the structures behind them are no longer able to compete deep into women's tournaments. And this, I think, is going to be a reality check for the South Americans that have done that in the past. And Brazil is the prime example of that. Norway's a sneaky good team, too, in terms of they're very old school. They're Scandinavian in how they play. It's correct. And, that's just what they do. It's how they play, and they take advantage of their descendants of Vikings, and they're big, so they take advantage of that. I could see Norway taking that European advantage onto that. I have England and New Zealand playing. New Zealand, one of the third place teams I picture there. The English are the better team than New Zealand. I think they find a way through that kind of matchup. I have France playing what I have as a third place team in Italy. The French are too strong for that. Yes, they have a history of choking, but I think that in this particular case, they managed to get by that one. This is where I'm going to raise some eyebrows. The final matchup I have is Spain versus the United States. Spoiler alert, I don't think the U.S. is going to win this tournament.
Wow.
And they have to go
in the quarters? Wow, Spain with the big upset. The upset of all upsets.
Yeah, and this is as much me just with a hunch that the U.S. is not going to win.
and you have this up-and-coming program versus the dominant program of all time. The U.S. there's been a level of complacency within the U.S.'s play for a while, in my opinion. Now, they have always shown an ability to rise up and perform in the moment. If we think about the lead up to 2015, they kind of looked flat then too, and then they just won the damn thing. However, I think that, the great irony there is, I think the surface that they complained bitterly about was an advantage for the U.S. in the last World Cup, because it really played the more fast, athletic teams, and the U.S. is the fastest and most athletic team in the world. That is their great advantage. But in Europe, with, I don't know, just the momentum of time on their side, I could see Spain pulling an upset in that matchup. All right, moving on to the other side of the bracket, Australia playing a third-place team in China. The Aussies are very strong. They are a dark horse to win this tournament. I have them advancing from that matchup. That brings us to Canada playing the second-place team in Scotland. It could be Japan.
That's interesting.
So
Canada, Scotland. The battle of...
I would... You have to do Scotland, basically. It's the Nova Scotia Derby. I would have Canada winning that one, but the Scots having, a noble exit from the tournament in the round of 16, their first World Cup, either gender, since what? Were they France?
In a long time.
No, they were in Germany.
Okay, 2006 then.
Anyway, Germany, Japan. The Japanese, I think, as I said, are on a down cycle. The Germans, last World Cup aside, men's, don't discount the Germans ever. Germany advances in that one. Sweden, Netherlands. I actually think the Swedes, again, the Dutch are cruising a lot on the reputation of that European Championship win, which was brilliant. They were so fun to watch in that tournament. But I just don't think that they have that same, it was lightning in a bottle, is what I'm saying. And they're still a very good team. I think the Swedes are slightly better. The Swedes are sneaky. They're quarterfinals every tournament, regardless of what you're doing, and it's been that forever, and here we are, quarterfinals. That would lead us to our quarterfinals, which I have Norway playing England. I think the English are really set up for a deep run in this, and that would be matchups they would dream of. England advances from that one. France versus Spain. I can't see Spain getting too deep. The hosts would get through in that one. I have the hosts into the semifinal. Australia, Canada. Sorry, guys, it ends here. Australia to the semifinal. Germany, Sweden. What did I just say about the Germans a minute ago? Germany to play France in the semifinal.
You know what the definition of a World Cup is, eh? It's a tournament that happens, and it lasts about a month, and at the end, German wins.
Yeah, 11 people chase the ball, and 11 people in short pants chase the ball, and at the end, Germany wins.
Yeah, exactly.
My semifinals are Germany, France, and England, Australia. So we have a Commonwealth derby and a European derby. I have the Aussies showing it of the ashes. They grab the soccer ashes on the female side to advance to the final. Australia does, steered by the best player in the world right now, I think, in Sam Kerr, the best player in this tournament anyway. And France, Germany, I think the hosts get through, which sets up a final of Australia versus France. Kevin, I would be happy with either one of those teams winning. The French, at this point, you would think might win it, but the hunch the Aussies are going to win the World Cup, and that is my pick to win the World Cup.
France will lose the World Cup at home at Stade de France in the final, the same place where they've won it before in 1998. This time, they're going to lose it, and the best player in the world, Sam Kerr, and her first Ballon d'Or. I know, it was Ida Egerberg with the Ballon d'Or. Sorry. But Sam Kerr, she was voted the best player, though. She will win the World Cup with Australia. That's going to be a tearjerker for the France fans, for the French fan in France. But deserving winner, I think. Could be a deserving winner.
Oh, I believe the final's in Lyon. But, yes, it would be a fun...
It's a habit. You hear France in a World Cup at home, we're like, okay, Stade de France. No, but apparently not.
I think that they have chosen stadiums that are slightly scaled down a little bit from the Men's World Cup to make sure that they're full. I don't know what the ticket sales are going to be like in this one, but the game is growing, particularly in Europe, and it should be a fun tournament all around. But yes, I am picking Australia. That's going to be. I have a hunch it's going to be more of a hipster pick than I think right now. That it will be a lot of people that cover the women's game will be leaning towards Australia making a very deep run in this tournament. I could see England getting a lot of love in this tournament too. France, obviously, the U.S. is your on paper favorite, although I just have a hunch, as I said there. Those are the 4 teams that I would most look at if we're going to be more general about this prediction as having a possibility. Don't discount the Germans either. You kind of forget about them. They're just like a sleeping giant hiding in the corner that can just pounce on you at any time. So throw them into the mix. Those teams all have, kind of, should say like 18% chances to win it, and then the rest of the percentages are sliced up with about 7 or 8 other teams, which would include Canada there in the 1 and 2% ranges. But that's how I see France 2019 playing it.
And on all notes, this ends our World Cup preview show. Make sure you follow Duane at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee, and our join the Twitter account at Soccer Today SBN. We'll be back next week. Make sure you follow our Twitter account. You will get the news of when we do shows. We are probably going to be able to do 5 shows a week for the next couple of weeks with the World Cup, with travels, with a lot of planning and a lot of things going on. But make sure you follow our Twitter accounts. That's where we will give you a little timeline of when we will be back. We wish you a great World Cup. We'll be back for sure about Tuesday next week. But for the Soccer Today and the 2 Solid 2 Soccer podcast, thank you for your time. If you like to hear Duane and I talk about Canadian soccer, make sure you go to patreon.com/sportspodcastnetwork. $2 a month will give you access to the 2 Solid 2 Soccer podcast. But for Duane, I'm Kevin. Enjoy the World Cup. And until next time, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.